Hey everybody, this is James, and today we're going to take a look at some of the games that were made as part of the first ever Game Develop Month, our community month-long game development event. The theme for the jam was Gathering, a jumping off point with some sticking close to the theme and others taking it in different and interesting directions altogether. On screen now you can see footage from my game Gather, which is available now on Steam and which was also developed during Game Develop Month. Running this event while also making a game for a full Steam release was a lot of fun, and I'm definitely looking forward to doing this again, which I'll have something to say about at the end of the video. But that's enough about the event itself. Let's take a look at some of the games I really loved that were made by the amazing game devs that took part. First up is a couple of silly and fun games, starting with Potion Panic by Dream Jam Games, Trollday Ansicht, Dwenju, Ladane and Matthias V. A game where you run around making potions for customers and it gets more chaotic as you go in a really good way. The controls took a few minutes to grasp as the player follows your mouse around, but then they honestly felt great. The environment looks great and the chaos of customers running around knocking things over works really well. Upgrades do a great job of motivating you to keep playing as well, and everything about the game was really well executed, silly fun. And speaking of silly fun, next we have The Game With No Name by Just Jada. Set in Wild West times, the basic structure of the game is you taking bounties and going on missions to take down bad guys. The FPS controls feel nice, and seeing bullets travel is fun too, so you have to time your shots with the enemy movements. The game starts out relatively normal, collecting bounties, but then it quickly escalates into fighting invincible bee men to take down their beehive and shooting Martians on flying saucers. I also really like the fact that the wagon you use to travel around in is pulled by a train instead of horses, presumably because horses require animations and trains don't. Moving away from the fun to something a little spookier, 9 Days by Humane Tiger is a zombie survival game told through a top-down map and using cards you interact with. I love the exploration of the world with card-style objects to interact with, showing the objects you can see on the map too. And it's got a fantastic hand-drawn art style with a day-night cycle thrown into the mix as well. It was a bit of a challenge trying to balance all the meters that you're keeping track of in the game. It felt like they went down quite fast, but this only added to the desperate horror vibes of the game. I could really see this being expanded into something much larger, especially as a more roguelike thing where the map and events are different every time. Sticking with the horror vibes is A Favour from My Brother by Ritas, a game with a really great mood and really great use of assets. You wander around an empty house, interacting with objects and taking pictures of ghosts. Using classic Resident Evil style tank controls was a great idea, and it fit really well with the style of this game. Exploring the house was really spooky, and the game made good use of creeping tension, limited jump scares, and a nice little twist for the final photo. As someone who is very easily spooked, this really worked well for me and I really enjoyed it. Still hanging out in the darkness, we also have Dark Sun Underworld by Sinpoker, a first-person dungeon crawler game with great vibes of exploring underground. I really love the art style of this game. The combat felt pretty nice, but unfortunately there was not quite enough in this version to keep you super engaged throughout. But they have said they're going to add more to it and I'd love to see how it develops further. Coming back out of the darkness to something a bit brighter is Islandustry by Stealthix, a game where you manage and gather resources to construct machines, to gather more resources, to construct more machines, to gather more resources in an endless loop of fun. The game has simple but very effective art and an addicting and solid gameplay loop. It's fun discovering what new upgrades you can unlock as you go as well, and especially unlocking the robots to automatically carry out some of the tasks for you is really fun. Also, the system included to control the AI of the robots to give them different tasks to do was very interesting too, and actually a pretty cool implementation in the game. Another management style game is Bus Conductor by Somnolent Team, a game where you are managing fares from passengers as they get on your bus. This was a really fun idea, and the core gameplay is very well complemented by the addition of extra complications like rush hour, avoiding kids and sleepy passengers. The difficulty ramp went really smoothly, and the fail state of the game being based on your average passenger review score was a great way to balance making mistakes without feeling them being too punishing. Really cool ideas in this one. Next up is Mirror City by Celtfire, a stealthy card game where you perform sneaky missions around the city to try to free the citizens of the city from manipulation. There was some really interesting use of the card mechanics of this for infiltration. Adding cards to your agents decks and choosing agents to bring in was a great way to customize things, and I could see that being interesting to expand on in a larger game. The missions definitely felt a little hard in the game, but overall I really love the whole vibe of this game. Leaving the hustle and bustle of the city for some ancient lands, it's Ritas Odyssey by Soulwolf X, Madstronaut, Rachel Schumacher and Langi Tuifwa. A platforming and combat game with some nice writing and very entertaining voice acting, especially from some of the bad guys. The platforming is simple but effective, and it has a unique system of switching from active jumping around to combat mode whenever you press down. Switching stances between combat and platforming is a great interaction. Rather than forcing you into combat when an enemy approaches, it's up to you to engage. However, the stamina meter could get a little frustrating as it felt a little too punishing at times. Especially in a game jam, I'd always err on the side of making things easier and more generous to players with meters like that. While the art was simple, I think it worked really nicely and it got its aims across in the game very nicely. Sticking with the platform vibes is Under the Ice by Good Games, a platformer with a story about a young girl and her dealings with a god. The platforming itself was relatively simple and fun, but the visuals and music were fantastic. The story was well told, but one minor complaint I had was that the combat was a little repetitive and didn't always feel like it connected very well. There was also a great health restore mechanic, letting you regain your health at any time, and that really helped make it so the challenge happens in the moment as you're fighting enemies, and you aren't stressed between sections of having to regain your health whenever you can, or going into a new combat situation with low health or something like that. A really fantastic innovation that I really liked. And wrapping up our look at 2D platformers is Grove by Stoff, Jamie Does Things, Jay and Andaranarin. A fantastic game in all aspects, which is slightly let down by the actual platforming itself. I love the whole concept of playing as a kid who's running around the grove and making up their own space adventure from the basic objects in the environment, and the game looks and sounds amazing too. Unfortunately, the jumping didn't feel good. The momentum-based movement felt very hard to control, especially in the air, where everything kind of felt a little bit too floaty. With a platformer like this, you really want the input to feel more responsive and snappy. It's unfortunate too, because if that felt a bit nicer, I thought the level design and progression through the game was all incredibly well thought out and designed. Everything else in this game I absolutely loved. But jumping from 2D platformers to the world of 3D, we have Barry Berry Basket by Iggy a fun classic 3D action platformer where you collect fruit and bring it back to people to satisfy their needs. It was a short but very fun experience that controlled really nicely. The level design was great, with a decent challenge to exploring the environment. It was straightforward but satisfying and really evoked the mid-90s platformer vibes nicely. And speaking of mid-90s platformers, next up we have Delicious Nightmare 2 by Carlos Rodriguez, which really hit that 3D collectathon platformer vibe nicely. There was a lot of polish put into this in certain sections, but it's unfortunately let down a little by the slightly awkward camera control, at least on keyboard, which is what I used to play it with. It might have been better with mouse control, but as it is, the camera snaps to angles with a key press in a very awkward keyboard layout where my fingers were being used on the WASD keys to move around, and the keys underneath that were what made the camera rotate, so I had to use two hands, one layered on top of another, a little bit hard to maneuver. Apart from that though, the level design was really great, with the idea of collecting ingredients in each level working really nicely. I also really enjoyed the little dance your character does at the end of each level. And finally, we have Troll by August Florin, one of my absolute favourite games from the event. Troll is a classic adventure game style game with absolutely amazing art and fantastic sound design and music too. It's really well written, with some simple puzzles to solve that felt very satisfying to complete. Not too hard, but not too obvious or basic as well. I love the abstract poetic interludes when you retrieve one of the fish, and I especially loved the final choice you were given and how it's handled without judgment on the player's choice. You're just shown the results of your decision. The fact you can also then reload and choose the other option just to see what would have happened too was a great inclusion. Absolutely fantastic work, and well worth playing if you have a spare 10 to 15 minutes. And there you have it, some of my favourite games made during Game Development Month. I wish I had time to cover all the games, but these were some of my personal highlights, as well as some of the best voted on by the community. Game Development Month has been a great time, and for the first one, I'm really happy with how many people got involved and submitted games. Of course, it being the first one implies the second one, and right now I have a rough plan to hold it in March next year. March starts on a Friday and ends on a Sunday next year, which are good times, and also it would give everyone one extra day to make their game too. But that's all a long way away, and we'll have more news about it later in the year of when it will actually take place. It might be April still, who knows, whatever the community decides is actually the best time for it. For now, stay tuned in the GDM Discord link down below for any updates we have, and to keep track of some of the games that people submitted as they get improved and expanded on. That's it for now, so thanks for watching, keep being awesome, and I'll see you all soon.